Here we are, the Crave Show with JRuss and Chris. We are back. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. Sorry, I had to move my sandwich before my dog gets a little frisky. How's it going?
You got good, man. Very good. You guys are Summerfest is in full swing, right?
Full swing. Yeah.
How's it going? Are you having fun?
I'm having a great time. We had a little bit of a weather hold yesterday afternoon and then again this morning. But otherwise, it's been beautiful weather, great skies. I think it's been a pretty safe event, which is kind of how that's the number one metric I use for whether it's good or not. And
Yeah, cool.
I haven't heard about a lot of, it's a boogie, and sometimes there's a little bit of unsafe stuff, but we try to handle that as much as we can. It's been good.
Yeah. Well, I heard that you've been jumping. I got a message from one of my friends earlier today, and she said that they've been jumping with you for the past 4 days, just having a blast, just so much fun jumping with you and learning from you, and they just were like so stoked.
Yeah, I think that's Naz and Lorena.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so they've been in my group a bunch and having a really good time. They sadly had to leave today. They changed their flights from last night to this afternoon, I guess, trying to squeeze in a couple more jumps.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they were great and learned a lot. I hope it certainly seemed to translate into their flying. So good stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I've jumped with both of them a lot. Spent time in the tunnel with both of them. They're really fun girls. Really fun.
Yeah. Well, they part of what the end of the conversations that we had was, hey, can we organize something where you come to San Marcos? So
yes, I love it. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so I might be headed down there. We looked at some dates on the calendar, and they're going to get back to me. So maybe be down
cool. There. That's excellent. Well, and that's what you and I were talking about. We were already talking about that, man.
Yeah.
So very good. Okay, well, let me know if we need to make that happen for sure. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So how has it been going? Anything? You said y'all had a weather hold.
Yeah. Weather holds are, it's skydiving and obviously I think everyone understands that we can't control the weather, but it's a good opportunity. At Summerfest, at least we have kind of vendor row where a lot of suit manufacturers and rig manufacturers and canopies and everybody sets up a tent. So that I don't know what the average jump number would be for Summerfest. I would guess around 500 or 600 jumps would be the average. But you can gather a lot of information. You can test gear. You can rent suits. You can use suits. There's an earplug manufacturer who will make you custom earplugs on the spot. UPT will let you jump their rig if you want. You can demo canopies. You can jump not your actual physical reserve, but a same size reserve. PD will hook up a reserve for you. So weather holds are, we're not jumping, but it's still an opportunity for people to get out there and talk to vendors and maybe try something new. I gave a seminar about angle flying during our weather hold this morning that I don't know how many people were there, maybe 40 or 50 people were listening. And, so a good opportunity, and we get back to jumping and get up in the air.
Yeah, cool. So earlier, before we started recording, you said you were about to say something about a couple people came up to you and said something or something.
Oh yeah. I've been approached many times, I think 3 or 4 times today, but a bunch of times, that I think despite the fact that there's not a lot of people in the audience, there are a lot of people listening to the podcast afterwards because, people that jump here, I had a guy, Kevin, who was formerly a camera flyer for the sponsored belly team at Sky Chicago. And he came up to me and said he had listened to our podcast with Tex and he's like, man, he's predominantly a belly flyer and said, I didn't really know what you guys were doing. And he's like, I learned so many things from that podcast. Awesome. Yeah, it was super cool. And just had people randomly stop me and say, hey, thanks for doing that podcast. I'm learning a ton. So the one that we did with Monica, where there was a canopy collision, I actually met the guy that was the other half of that, Matt. He's at Summerfest, super nice guy, and just had a chance to chat with them a little bit more, and I think that was they've talked a lot, a pretty big learning moment for him. So, yeah, I mean, just just nice to get that feedback, you know?
Yeah, that's man, that makes me feel so good. I'm so
Yeah.
thankful to hear that. That's very good. And we've had, some people leaving comments on YouTube and Facebook and stuff, just saying thank you, saying they've enjoyed it, that they're learning stuff, saying keep doing it, you guys. We're listening, we're listening. So
Yeah.
that's very good. And I hope that's the case. I hope that it's a benefit to people that are learning stuff. I'm learning, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I
And
would,
like,
oh, go ahead.
no, I mean, just same thing. I'm going to say it again, but if you are listening, please feel free to reach out to us with questions, topics that you want us to discuss, topics that you want us to research. We've said it. We don't know everything. And if you have something you want to know, if we don't know the answer, we will try to find it, or we'll find someone that does. We'll have them on. But, I mean, that's the whole point, is that we all learn, we get better, we get safer, we have more fun, we take care of one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just going to say the same thing. Like, if you're listening kind of after the fact, that I, I, I know enough people in the sport that I think I can just keep getting guests, and we'll have conversations about safety, and, trying to learn from things that have happened. And, but it is really nice, the people that I've had a couple of people suggest topics that we were able to take on, and that's great. And just getting that feedback, or videos, like you said, it's just really nice to have not just what I come up with, but what other people would really like to hear, because
Yeah.
that's what I want to talk about.
Man, I really enjoyed that conversation last week. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't have much input to give, because you guys were just covering so much and going into depth on such good stuff. But man, that was really, really good. Just talking about exit order and leading movement, all that stuff. And I found for myself, even just after the fact, and I was out at the drop zone organizing 2 different days, and it's like it helped. It changed the way that I was thinking about things. It helped with a couple of conversations. It was helping me think through things in a little bit different way, which I think was a very good way, positive way. So I loved that conversation. If you didn't hear
Yeah.
that episode about exit order and leading movement jumps, go back and listen to it. Episode 7, really good, really good.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of angles just over the years, and I do a lot during Summerfest. But for me, it was really nice to hear from Tex, and just, in a similar vein to, like, when I talk about VFS, man, I've spent a lot of time thinking about VFS, and how to do it better, I guess. And I get that sense from Tex about how much time he spent trying to be better at that discipline, and not only that, but then convey that information to other people, which is just super nice. And
Mm-hmm.
I really liked a lot of things that he had to say. It's great.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, hey, so since we're talking about Summerfest a little bit, how have you seen? What year did you start skydiving?
2002.
Oh, okay. Oh, for some reason I thought you'd been skydiving longer than that.
I mean, I made a static line jump in 1992 or 3.
Wait a
And
minute.
so,
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
well,
I'm doing
like some
math in my
people,
head. I'm like, what?
yeah, some people count that as their first moment. I mean, I did jump out of a plane, and I landed a parachute, but I think that my real start of skydiving was in 2002, where I
Okay,
really
so
started jumping.
2002.
Mm,
So 21 years? No,
about
21
that,
years you've been, and you have 24,000 skydives.
around
You've
21.
21,000.
Mm.
You've been averaging 1,000 skydives a year since you started.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
haven't kept a
crazy.
logbook for a while, but I do get a report from the drop zone at the end of every year. And yeah, there were a couple of years that I made less than 1,000. But then there were 3.5 years in Dubai where my team was doing about 2,000 jumps. And then I did other jumps beyond that. We were
Wow.
jumping so much.
Oh my goodness.
And, one of the reasons, like, there's some other VFS teams that are out there, and like, I do a lot of military work in Arizona. And when I'm there, sometimes I see the local VFS teams there. And if I'm already in town, I'll just go and help them out at the tunnel, and coach them for a little while. And it's just, I feel like the opportunity that Steph and I got, and a couple other people is just so unlike anything that happens in the normal skydiving world. And some of it has to do maybe with the talent that we had or the personality that we had. But to be honest, man, we were in the right place at the right time, and we just had this opportunity that I'm not going to say nobody's going to get, but it's going to be a while before something like that happens, where somebody looks at a team and says, just get as good as you can. All the jumps, all the tunnel, it's all free. And I just want to, as much as I can, I want to share that with other people, because I know how maybe not unique, but pretty close to unique that opportunity was.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, so on the Summerfest thing, the boogie, what I was going to ask you is, how have you seen boogies change a lot over the past 20 years? Did you, when you first started, were you going to boogies a lot?
Yeah. I mean, even back then I was charging, like I did more, I don't know, 1,200 jumps my first year or something. I had a buddy that, Graham, who he and I rock climbed together, skied together, kayaked together, whatever. We were, kind of like the super bad guys, just hard to separate. And he actually, he went overseas and did a tandem in South Africa on like a semester at sea program. And then he wrote me a postcard back when postcards were still a thing, and said, hey, when I get back, do you want to start skydiving? I had been racing motorcycles and just was banged up a lot. And I said, I was coming off my last knee surgery, and said, okay, let's do it. And we were both charging, and I wanted to, I don't know, learn as much as I could. So I did start going to boogies. I think that first year in 2002, I went to Couch Freaks, or maybe 2003. 2004, 3 was my first Summerfest. And I would say there's been a strong evolution in boogies, that those first few that I went to were so heavily weighted on the partying side. Everybody was just a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, and maybe not as many skydives, even though there were a lot of skydives going on. And I went there because they were like, well, you can jump as much as you want. And I had 2 rigs, and I hired a packer, and I was just literally every load walking to the loading area being like, can anybody free fly? Do you want to jump with me? And then this one guy showed up from my DZ, Jason Snalem. He's an English guy. And because he also wanted to jump, we ended up on, I've kind of hung on his coattails, to be honest, and he could fly head down and I couldn't. But I just got jump after jump after jump with Jason, and he kind of did a great job introducing me to free flying. And but over the years, what I feel like I've seen is that the boogies have shifted away from partying a little bit and gotten more into, like, people are expecting something out of their boogie. They want to go there and come out with more knowledge or more skill, or I feel like there's still some boogies that have that theme, and nothing wrong with that if that's your thing. But I've tried to structure the way that we do Summerfest as almost like mini skills camps, that each day is a skills camp for you, that you hopefully hook up with an organizer in your skill set and the discipline that you want to do, and that you're able to stay with that organizer so you get some consistent information, and your skills can progress. And it's not just one zoo dive after the other, but like a logical progression of trying to teach people to be better and safer skydivers. And I feel like that's worked really well. And I see that, I mean, not like it was, like I've changed the world. I did try to change Skydive Chicago and then also Skydive Sebastian, where I have a little bit of influence on their invasion boogie. But I feel like that's kind of a theme around the skydiving world.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was my next question, because I've noticed, I mean, I didn't start skydiving until 2013. I got my license, and then we were living overseas, so I really didn't get to jump that much those first few years until we moved back to Texas. So really in 2017, 2018 is when I really started jumping consistently. I was working at the tunnel, so that's kind of when I think my progression kind of started to, I really was able to put time and energy and effort into learning and growing and progressing. But I found myself, sometimes talking to somebody who doesn't skydive and say something about a boogie, and like, what is a boogie? What's that? And so I found myself like trying to just explain what a boogie is, but I've heard all these stories like from the good old days or the olden, how boogies used to be. I'm like, well, that's not really what they are anymore. Not the boogies I've been to. So it's like I end up just saying, it's just an excuse for a bunch of skydivers to get together and spend the weekend jumping, But
Yeah.
so my question is, and you kind of answered it already, unless you want to add something. But what makes a good boogie? Like what is it? And I think you may have said it. I don't know if there's more to say, but that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like if you were to plan, if you had free reign to just plan a boogie and you could make it exactly what you wanted it to be,
Mhm.
what would it be? Would it be pretty similar to what Summerfest is already?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's people here who are partying, and I'm going to serve drinks after this podcast, and I'm sure there's a fair share of all kinds of things that are happening after hours. Not all the jumps are what I said, where it's kind of a learning environment. There's costume things, theme jumps every day of like where the colors of your country was a couple days ago, and then I think yesterday was like leopard print or something like that, and today was there was a tutu Tuesday, and so I mean I don't mean to say that you're going to school when you come here. There's lots of other things going on. I'm just saying that we can accommodate lots of different plans for boogies, but one of them that I think is a growing plan is to get something out of it, to learn, to go back with a new skill set or a new knowledge base. And I think that a much larger percentage of our participants are here for that. And that I love this boogie. I think this is what boogie should be.
Yeah, that's cool. So what advice would you give? And this is, I mean, I want to hear this advice, but I'm hoping there's other people too, because it's pretty common for most boogies to have organizers. And so lots of times, the people organizing the boogie, the DZO or the drop zone manager or whatever, they're inviting people from other places, other drop zones to come organize at the boogie. So what advice do you have to what makes a good organizer specifically at a boogie? Like how can I really be serving the skydiving community when I'm at a boogie and I'm organizing?
Well, I mean, I think that in a similar way, that culture has shifted alongside the boogie shift, and maybe they're kind of lockstep. Um, when I when I took over first out of Chicago, like organizing the organizers, um, I felt that I had been here for like 10 years pretty consistently as a customer. And I felt that there were several years where number one, there weren't enough organizers. And number two, that the people were here kind of, I don't know how to politically correct say this, but kind of still had a sky god attitude. Like, hey, I'm
Hmm.
going to jump with my friends that are good. And if you get better, maybe you can try next year. And I really didn't like that. And even when I got to a skill set that was acceptable in their eyes, and I got to join that group, the jumps were fun, but I kind of already had not the best taste in my mouth about the way that had been run. And like the year before I took over, I was here as a customer, and there were two organizers that they never jumped with anybody other than like one of them was a female. She jumped with her boyfriend the whole time, and one other friend, and never even approached another person. And there wasn't a lot of oversight of that kind of stuff. So, during this boogie, a couple of Canadian guys, we get a ton of Canadian people for the boogie, and they've been a great crew year after year after year. And one of the guys, Alex, introduced me to two different guys who are Canadian guys, and and even as he was asking me, like, can I introduce you to him? I was like, you for sure you can, Alex. But listen, what I want is really low on the ego side and really high on the like helping side. So if these guys don't fit that bill, I don't really want to talk to them. And he said, no, 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 they're great. That's exactly right. Like, um, so it doesn't always work. Like sometimes I'll take recommendations because Rook, when I say that Rook Nelson, the DZO, what he wants is for the compilation of the organizers to basically represent a lot of different regions and not come from Chicago per se, even though a few people do. He wants California and he wants Florida and Canada and South America, and if we can have representation that doesn't isn't so echo chambery, then that's what he wants. So I that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who are a good skill set and something to offer, and also pretty humble and pretty grounded as far as not gonna have too heavy of an ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, so I think we're gonna have Andrea's gonna join us here in a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You had invited her to be on the show with us, and I talked to her a little bit, so I think she's gonna be getting on here in a minute. I sent her the link. Before she gets on, or while we're waiting for her to join us, can we talk just for a second about? Can you give me any tips on coaching head down? Teaching and coaching head down. Can you give me any tips on that?
Well,
Specifically coaching it, and not you understand what I'm saying, like,
yeah.
how do I help people learn to fly head down better? How do I be a better coach at that? There's Andrea. Hey.
Hey, Andrea.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
All right.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Ken?
good to see you. We're just chatting for a second about head down flying and coaching head down stuff. I'm putting JRuss on the spot.
Well, I think that a lot of times when it's brand new, like somebody hasn't done any head down, I wanna convey to them that even though the progression for the wind tunnel is belly back, sit, head down, or head up, head down, and head down is last, that's only based on wind speed and not necessarily difficulty. And so I try and link it back theoretically to, hey, remember when you're on your back and it was a little disorienting, right? You don't normally view the world that way. And so the right body position had you kind of looking at the top of the tunnel, but it took a little while to sort of wrap your mind around the fact that it's just not normal. Like belly and head up are both very intuitive as far as like what you're looking at and the sight picture that you have. And head down is again going to be like that. So like when you first get upside down, it's going to take your mind a second or maybe a few minutes to adjust. And then for you, I think the easiest thing for them is if you can go upside down with them. They're still holding the net. You're doing, supported head down. The instructor has a ton of control. But then once you get upside down with them, that can help that transition of the sort of the mind mapping of, hey, what am I doing right now? I think it's important to share with people that they have been vertical their entire life and that they're doing it while you're talking to them, and that all we're looking for is to flip that picture over and bend their legs 90 degrees if you're teaching shelf.
Yeah.
And that can really help people too, because a lot of times with adults, like, and I'm guessing you've gotten this, Chris, but when I would take kids in the tunnel, they were so much easier to teach because they just let the tunnel be what it was. And they didn't mess it up with what they thought it was supposed to be. And so if you can tell people, look, you've been vertical your whole life, man. You're doing it right now. And you don't walk around with your chin up or your chest out or your chin on your chest or whatever. Just, we're going to get upside down on the net and stretch your body out. And just what you are right now, we're going to flip over. And that can really help people not muddy the water with what they think it's supposed to be.
That's good, man. That's very good. I'm absolutely going to use that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Andrea, we're glad
Yes.
you're here. Thank you for joining
Glad
us.
to be here.
Yeah. JRuss, I'm gonna throw it to you, man. Can you?
Well, first of all, I mean, you asked me about Summerfest, but I'm pretty deep in the organization of Summerfest, so I don't know if I'm the most unbiased observer. So, Andrea, how's our Summerfest doing?
I'd say pretty good. In general,
Yeah.
it's definitely my must-go-to boogie of the year because, I don't know, you kind of did a great job explaining. You kind of have everything. If you want to go to bed early and be on first load and learn a lot and have really great organized jumps, there's that. But if you want to take a day to just do fun inflatable or costume jumps with your friends, you can do that, or stay up late and do the events and parties. So kind of has everything. Yeah, I'd say
Cool.
you guys do a pretty good job.
Okay. Excellent. And I mean, you've been coming for like a decade or more, so we can't be doing too bad.
Yeah, exactly. Canadians
Yeah.
travel far for it, so it's a good indication.
Yeah. 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 We have so many of you guys, and hopefully more next year, which is an opportunity, I guess. You know, who, oh, shoot. Now I'm forgetting who Alex recommended to me. An angle organizer, maybe Tommy.
I
Is that
think so.
right?
Yeah,
About my
from
size
Quebec.
guy, and yeah, and then a taller guy who also does angles, and I'm unable to remember his name. But Alex had. What do you think of Tommy? How's he?
I just met him, so
Okay.
I
All
cannot
right.
explain because Canada's large. We don't actually all
Yeah,
know
of
each other.
course.
So I just met him here. But I mean, I feel like I know Alex really well. And so I feel like
Yeah.
his recommendation means it's probably good. Alex is pretty
Okay.
level headed and knows his stuff. So,
Perfect. All
That's
right.
awesome.
So, in I didn't talk much with Andrea beforehand, similar to other guests, because I want the conversation to kind of develop organically, and I don't want to cloud it up with my thoughts. But Chris and I have I mean, Chris's platform for Crave is a teaching platform, and a heavy emphasis on safety and trying to learn and have better, safer skydivers. And so just a tiny bit of background that I know about Andrea, and then I'm going to let her tell her own story of coming to Summerfest for many years, and I believe that's how we met. And then at some point, I would hazard a guess at 6 years ago, um, but not exactly sure. I heard from a friend that Andrea had an accident. The information I got, as I recall, is that it was a canopy accident, um, and that it had been pretty serious. And so I think that's all the introduction that I'm going to give, and I'm going to let Andrea take it from there.
okay. Yeah. Good memory on the years. It's coming up to 6 years on August 20th. Yeah. Where do I start? At the beginning?
Wherever you want. It's a podcast that takes an hour.
We'll probably interrupt and ask questions anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, I met JRuss here at Summerfest. My first Summerfest was in 2013. I was trying to figure it out this week. In 2013 and 2011, kind of similar to what you said. I think my first jump was in 2009, but I don't count that as like the start of
Yeah.
my jumping. 2011 is when I got solo certified, but 2012 is when I actually started like having my own gear and jumping a lot, I'd say. So kind of shortly after that, I was starting to attend Summerfest. And then had progressed a lot in my jumping. I did a lot of free fly, head down, angles, kind of did a lot of tunnel. Just, yeah, really liked learning new things in the sport and trying everything. Tried wingsuiting as well. Also love that. Just involves a whole bunch of other gear that's needed. And yeah, shortly after Summerfest in 2017, I had a skydiving accident. Can get into more details, but I hit the ground quite hard, and wasn't. It was super bad in that I have a permanent disability from it, but it wasn't like ever life threatening. I didn't break anything else except one vertebrae in my spine that kind of burst inwards and got into my spinal cord. So I have a spinal cord injury, technically a paraplegic, though a lot of people don't kind of fully know what that entails because I am ambulatory and up walking around. That's the gist of it. And then wherever you want to know more information, we can get into it.
Do you mind telling us about the accident? Like, do you mind telling us like, what happened?
Yeah, I don't like fully remember everything, I feel like. I don't. I think it was surprising that it was me, at least in the group, because everyone was like, Andrea's very like conservative. I'm not swooping. I don't really do crazy things under canopy. I'm usually just trying to get down safe. It was just a 90-degree turn. I kind of got distracted on landing. There was a couple things, I guess. I was coming from Summerfest where I was demoing a 97 canopy katana, and then I was going back to my 107. So I feel like I knew, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be as responsive as I want. I was landing kind of at a bit of an uphill part of the landing area. So I just think when I knew I was coming in fast and maybe going to injure my legs, that I tucked my legs up and instead landed on my ass, and that was enough to just kind of fracture my L2 vertebrae. Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah.
well, no, I was just curious. You said that you do have a permanent disability, but you're also able to walk around. What is that? Can you explain that to me? Like the paraplegic, but also being able to move, and you're still able to jump and stuff?
Yeah. So
I'm just very curious.
yeah.
Is that okay? I mean,
No, it is. It is.
okay.
So when I was first injured, basically it'd be more so what people assume as paraplegic, like below the waist, everything was numb, couldn't move anything, couldn't feel
Okay.
anything. A host of other issues, like going to the bathroom and all these other things that people kind of don't realize come with that as well, affecting like your whole nervous system. And so in a wheelchair, I was in the hospital for 10 days. I got surgery on my spine and have like rods, and it's fused now. Kind of like most of my lower back is fused. Not a great arch anymore. And was in rehab for 2 months, kind of learning how to use a wheelchair and how to navigate life with disability. And from that point, like you don't really know I've known before my injury, I had 2 skydiver friends that had broken their spine and they weren't walking, but then within 3 weeks or a month, they were kind of back up and functioning fairly normally. So I was a bit naive about my injury. I was like, oh, this has happened to friends. Like, this is going to take up a couple months, but I'll be walking out of rehab in no time, which wasn't the case. I didn't really gain anything back in the 2 months that I was in rehab. I continued doing private physiotherapy outside of that, which actually was from, if you know Rovez and Zophie, JRuss, through skydivers that I found this specific clinic as well. So, really, really helping me out there from some paramedics who had a friend who started a spinal cord injury rehab center, private center. So my skydiving friend reached out to me and said, have you thought about like post-rehab? And I honestly hadn't when she asked me. So again, the Sky Fam really takes care of you. I went there after and just was working on trying to gain anything back that I could. You don't really know with spinal cord injuries. They can't really give you a prognosis. I mean, they tend to be pretty negative. Like when I asked, they were like, you're not going to walk again, or, statistically it's really low, or wherever you are 1 year from now is like where you're going to plateau. And I found none of that to be true from people I've met, from my own experience. So I think I was just naive and stubborn, and I was like, well, I'm going to try and get what I can back, and have slowly gotten a lot back. So that's why I say I'm ambulatory. I wear AFOs, which are ankle foot orthotics, so kind of just braces around my, like below the knee, supporting my ankles, and I use hiking poles. But I started in a wheelchair. I still use a wheelchair now, and kind of worked my way up through various medical devices and walkers and crutches and hiking poles. And where I'm at now is that I'm walking with aids usually. So that's kind of a description of my disability. But yeah, technically I'm a paraplegic because it affects my lower body. I just think people assume paraplegic means you're fully paralyzed below the waist and can't do things. So I generally find it's just easier to say I have a spinal cord injury. That kind of encompasses my reality better, I guess, or lines up with what people envision better.
So when do you use a wheelchair, and when do you walk with the walking sticks or canes or whatever? And how do you?
It depends on the situation, the environment I'm in. I don't use my wheelchair very often anymore. I kind of reached a place where it was easier for me in my progression at some point, even though I was slow, like maybe to run an errand, like go pick up groceries. I reached a point where I was like, oh, walking is actually easier than me like putting my wheelchair in and out of the car, because that's a process that, I kind of got down and it's fast, but it kind of reached a point that it was easier to walk than do that. So kind of taking into consideration those things. Also where I am, if it's accessible in a wheelchair and it's super long distances, like I went, I don't know, but I went to the Paralympics in 2021, and that, like, where Team Canada was living to the cafeteria was like a kilometer away to get food and things like that. And it was fully accessible, obviously, for the Paralympics. So that was easy to have a chair and kind of more efficient. Like I could get there. It was really hot. So I could get there, conserve energy for the competition, just kind of quicker, easier to put a food tray on my lap and hold it in my hand. Like when I have crutches, I can't really carry things. So there's a lot going into the decision-making process of like what aids I use, but generally whatever is going to help me be the most independent and mobile and comfortable. I know some people, actually, JRuss, I know you came up to me, I think, a couple years ago at Summerfest when I had my wheelchair, and you were like, I thought you were up walking, so I'm just wondering because you're in a chair still. And I was like, yeah, no, it's not a bad thing. I think people are like, oh, I thought you were out of the wheelchair, which is so good. Now that you're in a wheelchair, isn't that bad again? But I think people kind of are relating, it's just misconceptions or bad representation of disability, right? Like a wheelchair is not a negative thing. It's actually a very helpful tool to like get me around, and I can be more independent in it and have less pain, or, you know, there's so many reasons people use wheelchairs as opposed to walking. And while it can seem like that would make your life difficult, I'm like, actually my disability makes life difficult and a wheelchair makes it a lot easier, as opposed to like life in a wheelchair being difficult. I kind of like to rephrase that of like a wheelchair is actually really helpful when you have my disability. I think with a disability is difficult, and that's a helpful tool as opposed to thinking of the mobility device as the negative part.
That's good. Mindset, you're just deciding what you're going to focus on. You know, you're going to focus on the positive or the negative. That's good. It's really good.
Andrea, can I ask, just going back to the actual incident, you said Katana 107?
Yeah.
Yep. And you're a fairly small human being. What was your wing loading? Do you know?
I don't remember exactly, but I'm like 125 out the door to a 107. So
yeah, so just over one.
And
at that time you would have been the same weight and everything.
Yeah, that's what it was at that time.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure that more than anybody else on the earth, you have gone over that incident many times in your mind, and if there was video, would have taken a look at it. And you mentioned that you got distracted, and on a 90-degree turn, which a katana is kind of a transitional canopy between a non-swooping and a swooping canopy, and so for the people who don't know, it has, in my opinion, similar characteristics to something like a velocity, kind of interesting openings, and then it dives aggressively when you ask it to. Unlike a velocity, it's usually a little bit better about coming out of a bad situation if you need to add toggles, but and also it won't sail nearly as far as a velocity, although in many other ways it's very similar. So with under a one wing loading, what distracted you?
So I think, going back on that as well, like I was saying how I, wasn't, I guess you could say this, I was doing a 90-degree on fronts, which I had been getting into and was learning from, sorry, there's flies in here, from like a swooper that, was starting to give me basics. And I was usually coming out very high, like, and then being like, you can get a bit lower. And I was like, no, I'm good right now. Just seeing what the speed's at, what it's doing. I'd never kind of been close to coming out at the right spot. Like I was still quite high. And so I think part of it is also just like my inexperience with that, as well as getting distracted, as well as being like, oh, it's not going to respond the way I want it to because I'm back on my 107. I honestly just had looked up at someone who landed. I'm thinking I got distracted because, again, I don't even remember that I landed on my butt. Like this is being told to me by the person watching it. So again, there's things of like, it's kind of confusing to me. The last thing I really remember is making the turn, looking up at someone who just landed. I was on a work jump. I was doing a video jump. So it's kind of, yeah, just looking at the other videographers and where they were in their tandem's coming in. It was looking up at that person and then kind of back and then hitting the ground. So that's why I'm saying, like, I assume that played a part in it. If I was too low and then looked away for a second. And again, with you mentioning toggles, like, I don't know what happened. The person watching said that they didn't think I did anything. Like that it
Oh,
was
really?
make the turn and then hit the ground. They weren't super close to me, and it was just one person who saw it. So again, even he was like, there was a lot of things going on where I was like, sorry, can I swear on this? I don't know.
It's an adult podcast.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, it's skydiver, so I shouldn't be asking that. But where he was like, oh shit. And, even before I hit the ground, said that, like, he had an oh shit moment, call 911 to, like, the other guy standing there. So
Just
even
from
his
looking at your
memory is
approach.
like a little, just from like right before I hit the ground, I guess.
Yeah.
But, like, knew that I wasn't, whatever would have been done wasn't going to recover from it, I guess. But again, that's even me, because I did bounce and landed on my stomach. Like, from what I remember is just kind of that turn and then being on my stomach with the air knocked out of me. And, like, I was trying to say help, but couldn't because I didn't have air. And then that's why it's kind of, again, with the what ifs and going back and trying to think about it was hard, because again, I don't know kind of why that happens of not remembering it exactly. I guess it's all happening fast. And then with a traumatic injury, I don't know if there's, kind of more reasonings as to why you don't remember all the details. But it was harder to go back on the what ifs because I wasn't even clear, like, exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I do know, like, the drop zone in it has hard ground. It is not forgiving at all, which like can make a difference. Like, it's very, very hard. It hadn't rained in weeks there, and, like, it's kind of a common complaint. It's like, it's really hard, even just landing on your feet. Like, it's just a hard ground. So there was no forgiving, because some people have an accident like that and kind of bounce and are like, whew, I got away really lucky. And yeah, for mine, I didn't get away from it.
Yeah. And what kind of canopy are you jumping now?
I'm on a Pulse 150.
Okay. So really nice openings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I basically had been kind of in the smallest in my rig and then upsized to the biggest I could. So for me, the Pulse was like, it packs a size down, which I was trying to just get as big as I could at my canopy when I was first coming back. Because I started skydiving again a year after, basically right after the surgeon okayed it, which was about a year. And I wasn't sure, again, my leg strength then wasn't as it is now. So coming in for landing and being able to lift your legs, like, I just wanted the biggest canopy I could have.
Yeah.
I have been meaning to go down to 135. It's just not a super big priority for me, and it's more so it's less tight in my rig. I generally at Summerfest demo Jesse will tell, like, last year, it's like, oh yeah, you just took the Pulse 135 for the whole week. It's like, no one else is wanting to demo it in that size. So
Pulse is not the hot ticket.
yeah, it's not.
So
okay.
what is your skydiving, your return to skydiving been like? So that was, you've been, the accident was 6 years ago, and then a year after the accident you started, so you've been back to skydiving for about 5 years almost, is that right?
Oh my gosh, that sounds crazy to me, but I guess so, yeah. So almost like as much after my injury as before, if I started in kind of 2012. Yeah, so I did a tandem with a lot of friends there with me at my home DZ. That was my first jump back. And then we kind of practiced the landing, like, oh, can you lift your legs? Can you not? Like, just sorting that out. And that went well. So then the next day I did a solo jump with two of my friends who are, well, PFF instructors in Canada. So it's like AFF equivalent. Just because we weren't really sure, I kind of had my legs, like, taped together, kind of similar to an iFly harness that we have in Canada that's made for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
I had gone in the tunnel and used that before I went back to skydiving, just to see if I could be stable, how it kind of worked, because at that point I was fully in my wheelchair and had maybe stood up and taken a few steps, but was not like walking around. So I went and did like a PFF jump, like a mock jump. They were just there in case, just to support, but kind of right away they let go. And then we were all looking at each other like, what do we do now? Like, I guess we did some turns and like, because we thought it was going to just be more unstable and it would take a few seconds, but it was like right back to that. And then I just started jumping again.
Do you remember that jump very clearly? Like, how did you
Yes.
feel? What was that like? Like, I want to know, like, what did you feel like in the plane ride when you were exiting the door? Like, what was it like?
It was super exciting. It was like, you know, when you do something new, like a helicopter jump or a hot air balloon jump, like something different in skydiving, and it's just like pure excitement, especially when you get down to the ground and you look at your friends and you're just like, that was amazing. It was really like that, especially because the people who were on that solo jump with me, like JRuss, he had done my actual PFF course and gotten me soloed, and the other jumper was someone who we started at the same time together and like progressed together, and he had, you know, gone on to being an instructor. So it was with two people that had been there with me from the beginning and seen me through everything. So it was definitely really fun, really exciting. I'm sure I was a bit nervous beforehand, same as I don't know, when we have Canada. Sometimes the first jump back after it's been a couple months, you just not even like, I'm not scared, but just, you know, that little nervous excitement.
Sure.
But I think I've been asked a lot. I think if the accident had been out of my control, like some crazy, you know, double malfunction or something that had been completely out of my control that went wrong, it might have been different. But because I knew just, you know, I had a perfect jump, I had a perfect canopy, and that like I did something wrong, I think it was easier to come back to. I wasn't worried about kind of the uncontrollable things. Like I know some people, if you have an accident and it's not in your control, it feels very different to maybe come back to and reckon with. But for me, I was like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna be unsafe in my landing, and I know it'll go okay. So I think that maybe changes whether people come back or not, or how those feelings kind of come about. But no, it was just a lot of excitement, and I felt like I didn't want to leave the community. Like you know, it was something I was really passionate about, and it caused this lifelong disability, and I didn't want to just like exit on that negative front. I was really passionate about it and always wanted to come back. And this is off topic, well, not off topic, but I think skydiving helped me a lot with my recovery in dealing with my disability, because I was just so aware of my body, and you know, as I was trying to gain muscles back and you're trying to think about certain movements, like a lot of skydiving is being aware of your body, right? Even when you can't see it, visualizing, like we're talking things in head down, things that are super weird. So this is really hard when you're paralyzed and you're like it was a lot of visualization. Like you can look down on your legs and try and move it and they're not moving. So you're just, again, all the time, I was like closing my eyes, trying to visualize it. Like the skills that you kind of develop through skydiving and body awareness, I think definitely helps like, me walk again and kind of gain that. So they kind of fit hand in hand, I think. Like, I know it caused my disability, but I also think it really helped how I was able to kind of recover a bit from that as well.
And how are your flight skills now compared to before the accident, as far as getting back to where you were? Are you pretty close, similar? What's it like?
I'm definitely not at the same level that I was at. Just there's certain things I can't do. I feel like obviously there's a lot to learn, but I think at the time of my injury, I could kind of not do everything, but I was pretty proficient at sit flying, angle flying, head down. I've done big way head downs, like movement, dynamic stuff in the tunnel, in the sky. Head down is actually easiest for me now. I love belly flying, actually. I always try and get in some like good four-way jumps at Summerfest belly flying, but because I can't really arch anymore, I'm really small, and I can't really arch anymore, I'm just so slow on belly, so people can't keep up. And I've been hesitant to add weights around like my broken spine. And so head down, like, I don't know, anyone who's learning head down, the coaches are always like, relax your legs. And then I had really relaxed legs, and I was like, I got it. You don't really need these. Like,
That's awesome.
So I think head down has been good. Static was hard at first with fully relaxed legs, and sometimes when I'm gaining stuff, my legs kind of get in the way. It's like they kick back to the daffy I would go into, but don't always stay there. It'll just like have one leg that kind of just once in a while remembers its daffy position and goes back and forth. So sometimes I burble myself a little bit. But head down and angle are kind of easiest for me now, because you're not using your legs as much. Sit flying, I've been able to sit in the sky briefly. It's kind of hit or miss. And again, I'm very slow because I'm light. I'm back to like early stages of sit fly where you're really wide and big, and then everyone else just sinks right out. So I kind of tend to just stay on my head.
That's good.
I think it's important to add from an outside perspective that I don't know. I've made 1 or 2 jumps with Andrea since your injury, and her head down is very good. Like there's a lot of people who don't have anything wrong with their body and cannot fly like that. So it's really quite good. As I recall, the first jump I made back with her, I was also on my head and came up and took a dock, and we did a little bit of carving and took another dock, and the kind of jump that makes the highlight reel. It's good.
Thank you. That means a lot.
So I have a question a little more, I don't know if it's not philosophical, but, and if you don't want to answer, you can say pass. Yeah. But how did you find like yourself, how did it affect the way that you think about yourself, the way that you think about life, the way that you think about others, like besides just the physical aspect and skydiving per se, but how else has it affected you? I mean, you seem like just a bright, cheery, like you're grounded. Seems like you've dealt with it. I mean, you're able to laugh and make jokes about it. So why, how, what?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. I think for sure there's things I've learned, and you know, it kind of brings important parts of your life or people, I guess, to you when you go through something like that. But I think in terms of you saying like I seem positive and happy, I think like that was always me. So I think that really helped in my positive outlook. Like I've just been always like probably like hopelessly optimistic or stubborn. I think, you know, it was also stubbornness, that like optimism and stubbornness at the beginning. But I think I know some people are like, oh, I learned so much from this and my life changed so much and I wouldn't take it back for the world. And I'm not that I don't really feel that way, and that I don't think I had a huge mental shift on like life and how it works. And I think I already had that, which I'm not trying to be like cocky in any way. I just think I already had, you know, with whatever I'd gone through in life or friends that I had, like I always just already had that outlook of like, that's kind of why I was skydiving and trying to travel a lot. Like I was like, I don't know how long I'm here. I don't know how long I have this body. So like, I just need to go for it. So that kind of just, I was really glad when it happened that I did all the things that I did. And I had done a couple backpacking trips in 2017 that I was like unsure I could get away with work. And I was like, I'm just going. And like when my accident happened, I'm like, thank God I just did that, right? But I think for sure coming to terms with, like I remember the first time being like, oh, I'm a paraplegic now, or I'm disabled, and having to like kind of adopt this identity that I didn't want. You know, that all of a sudden I had to kind of, it's a new identity that I didn't feel comfortable in yet. Like I didn't know how to navigate the world as a disabled person. I was really new using a wheelchair. Like everything was so new. But I think I think people are often like, oh, I don't know if I'd be so happy if I was you, which like is kind of offensive sometimes. Not offensive. And I'm like, what? Should I just sit in bed all day and do nothing? But like most disabled people I know,
how dare you be happy?
Yeah, are kind of the same. Like making jokes. It's like what else are you gonna do? Like we're not here for very long, so just try and have fun and have a good time. Obviously, there's really shitty days, and it's not an easy thing to go through by any means. But I think that was kind of the focus of just like, okay, well, I can't really control this. So let's just try and like find joy, try and find community, like good friends. I think like being here, actually, I had an injury kind of related to my disability before Summerfest. I haven't actually been jumping here. I've kind of happened the week before, and I was like, am I going to come and just hang out? Am I not going to come? Is it more depressing sometimes to be there and not be able to be jumping when you're injured? And I showed up, and like there's, Mike and Matt, 2 other skydivers in wheelchairs. I met this guy, Jesse, who uses AFOs and crutches, like very similar to me. And I was like, oh, this is so great to see. Like at this one boogie, there's, 4 disabled skydivers. Well, Nick Fenner too, who's an amputee as well. So, yeah, just finding community in that. And if you talk to any of those guys as well, I think they're kind of the same, where like life goes on and we can, be really sad about it. And some days we are, but for the most part, we want to have fun and just live life to the fullest, as cliche as that is. So yeah, I think it would have, again, a long answer to how I think about things philosophically, but I think in terms of my identity, that was the hardest part of like coming to terms with the body, or like not liking my body and like not feeling at home in it, which is a very weird thing, or not feeling good in it, or not feeling like I looked good or felt good, or kind of meshing all of those things definitely takes time to feel at home in your body again and have confidence, I guess, or yeah. So I think it's all about adapting. Like humans adapt really well. You don't really have a choice, and so you're kind of forced to do it. But I think, even talking to, because I've gone through this, I've formed a lot of bonds with, like, Doug Barron I'm really close to. Like, people have gone through skydiving accidents. I've been talking with Zach this week a lot, and just, you have a lot to relate to kind of instantly once you've gone through something like that. And it has been nice. I don't want to say nice, but because it's happened, it has been nice to be able to then like be there or talk with other people who kind of have something. Like, I'm always happy to be like, even if it's an injury that isn't going to cause a permanent disability, I'm like, I can chat with you. Like, I can relate to a lot of this. So, yeah, it was helpful to me to have those people when I was injured. And
I just want to throw in that for the background of people who don't know, Doug Barron is a local belly jumper who had a AED fire in his swoop, and so he had 2 out, obviously, and I believe his main collapsed, and he went kind of through the wing of the otter that was parked and a fence, and then he hit the tarmac and Skydive Sebastian and broke a lot of things, and so he's back to jumping, but a considerable life change. And then Zach Soppel is the Zach, I believe, that you mentioned, that he had a canopy accident last year, I think.
I think it was, I think it was just last May.
Yeah, he's up and around, but it's been a tough road for him as well. And I don't think he's jumping much, if at all. I talked to him the other day, but again, kind of a life change related to, which is interesting, that Zach's injury on the surface, because he's walking without assistance, could seem less severe than yours, but you're able to jump, and I don't think he can jump. So yeah, just to give a little bit of background about those names that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I did have a question, Andrea, just because all these years you said work. What do you do for work?
That's a great question. Sorry, this came up last night at the tiki. And, so, okay, pre-injury, I worked in theater and events. So backstage, like setting up lighting sets, doing like lighting design for concerts and theater shows, which is pretty physical, like climbing a lot of ladders, working up high in the rafters and stuff. But I have gone back to that a little bit. So I've done a little bit of lighting design work for theater stuff in Toronto. I'm working for the Ontario Parasport Collective. So in the parasport world, which is something I really got into after I was injured. I was always, aside from skydiving, athletic and liked doing sports. So I've been involved in a lot of parasports. And I actually just also got a job with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. I'm going to be going to like Santiago with them and actually interviewing athletes and all of that stuff at the Pan Am Games. But yeah, I've kind of been doing a mixed bag of things. I've always done freelance and contract work, which is why it's hard to answer, because it just depends on the contract I get. And I have a lot of interests, so my work's kind of all over the place.
Good. And one more thing, if I can put you on the spot, we glossed over a fact that was totally unaware of, and that is that I believe you said you competed in the Paralympics. So I would like to hear what what did you do, and how was that, and how was the training, and did you win, or how did you feel about your performance?
I think I won by just going. Like that was the win
Okay.
for me,
Yeah.
was getting to the Paralympics. Uh, but yeah, so it was in kayaking.
Mm,
So in the para event, or it's sprint kayaking, so it's kind of like rowing, like thin long boats, and you're like going down a straight line as fast as you can. It's a 200-meter sprint, so it takes like less
okay.
than a minute.
Is that a
Um,
what's a skull?
that's a rowing thing.
Oh, okay. It's not the same thing. Okay.
So I'm like, that's.
Wait.
I think that's a rowing when
Okay.
there's one person in the boat.
Okay.
This is probably wrong. Rowing is like the enemy of kayaking, so I don't know.
Forget those guys.
Yeah, so training, it was kind of interesting. It was nice to get into, and there was kind of in Rio in 2016 was the first time this event was around. So Canada and Ontario, specifically where I lived, had been trying to build a team of para athletes to get into this sport. So I kind of did it at the same time as 3 other people were learning it, and adults as well, again, with having that community. And I liked it. I was kind of good at it, so I kept going and competing. And then in August 2019, I was actually like, maybe I'll take a step back next year. I want to do a bit more skydiving. The competitive side is getting like pretty intense. And then I qualified for Tokyo 2020 at the end of 2019. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do one more year. I know this sounds weird, but at the times I had and versus what could be there, my coaches weren't putting that pressure on me, but the water was a lot faster over there. It's warm water. The course we were on is a lot faster. So the times I was getting at home, like there, I was like 5 seconds faster, which is huge in a less
Wow.
than a minute race. But it's just
Yeah.
the water. Like here, we're in weedy water that's colder, and it's actually a lot slower. And there, you're in like warmer water that's a bit deeper, and so just stuff I wasn't prepared for. But then COVID happened, so it was kind of a bit of a tumultuous journey leading up to it, training all through COVID, not knowing if the games were going to happen or not. And then they happened a year later in 2021, just a delay. But yeah, like I said, getting there, kind of, you have to kind of place top 10 in the world to get a spot there. So for me, that was the win. I made the final of my event, which was my goal, so I'm happy with that. It was, I was going just a couple years after I became disabled, so I didn't have medaling hopes like against people who'd been doing this for years. So just being there was really fun.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing a little bit about your story and life. And it's really encouraging to hear, and just nice to meet another fun, happy skydiver.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. And so are you, I didn't understand, you are jumping this week at Summerfest, or you're not jumping?
I'm not jumping
Okay.
as of right now.
But
It's a
but you
question
have,
mark.
that's just because you just had another little injury or something, you said?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Non-skydiving related.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. It's really nice to meet you. Nice to have you on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Blue
Thanks
skies,
for coming
Andrea.
back to Summerfest.
Of course, always.
I'll see you in the morning.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Bye.
See ya.
Well, that was awesome. I'm really glad that she was able to join us. That was fun.
Yeah, it was. I had only just kind of met her and jumped with her for a few years when she had her accident. So it was. I mean, from the outside, and I don't know her super well. Just a bummer to see. I mean, she was and still is very talented, but when for a lot of the uneducated, which I would say I was about back injuries and kind of still am, to hear, oh, they broke their back, they're paralyzed from the waist down. You just take a deep breath and, oh man, that's a hard bit of information to hear. So when she came back the following year, and when I was able to jump with her, it was just, I don't know, super, super, super cool. That, and I think she said it, but I feel like she downplayed it a little bit, that the doctors were kind of like, you're not going to walk again. This is it. And she kind of told them where they could put that, um, and just kept charging back, and it worked. Which, I think probably a lot of people have that attitude, and not to discount anybody who isn't able to make it work. Sometimes it's just not in the cards. But she definitely charged forward in spite of what those doctors were telling her, and found a way to make it work, which is super cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who not too long ago was broke his back. It was in a vehicle accident, and yeah, I mean, I try to check on him every once in a while and talk to him, but it's like sometimes I just don't know what to say. I don't know how to encourage him, how to help him, and he is a skydiver too. Like, I mean, we would jump together, and we worked in the tunnel together a little bit, but so yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah, I think we all get to the point where we know that's part of life, and I think that the way that she was talking about it is probably something that people who don't go through it don't necessarily think. I think, like, in the past, when I know somebody's been injured, I think in my mind I look at it like this death sentence, and everything's over, and everything that you wanted to do now is totally different, and you've got this just uphill battle on everything. But the limited amount of experiences that I've had with people who have gone through those circumstances is that, I mean, that's definitely not their mindset. I had a skydiving friend that was paralyzed from the waist down, a little bit of use of his arms, on a skydiving accident, and he did have some dark days in the beginning of that time, but he made it through that, and persevered, and had definitely, I mean, talking to him, that his world kind of turned internal, and he went from a person that he said he didn't really like before the accident, that his life was kind of changed, and he became someone that he really did like, and so whether it's the accident or he would have gotten there of his own, he certainly didn't look at it as a death sentence. He looked at it as, this is part of my life, and I'm going to make the best of it, which I believe is very similar to what Andrea is saying, even though their injuries were different, and so it's just, I don't know. My experience has in talking to those people has definitely changed kind of the way that I look at it. Not that not that I'm cavalier about it, or think, oh, that's fine, they'll be fine, because it's obviously going to change their life and be a lot of challenges, but just stop looking at it like, oh, that's the worst thing ever, and life is just going to suck, because that's not true.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's interesting what you said about your friend, that he kind of likes himself more now, or he became a person that he actually likes, whereas maybe he didn't like himself beforehand. And it made me think of the phrase, like the refiner's fire. How sometimes we go through people go through difficult situations. It doesn't have to be an injury. It could be, a relationship that goes bad, or hurt, something like that. But sometimes some people go through rough things, bad things, difficult things, and it refines them like gold in a,
Sure.
being refined, that it burns off all the bad stuff, and what's left is this like pure, beautiful, awesome thing. And then some people go through struggles and difficulty and tragedy, and it like somehow taints them or makes them more resentful or more negative. But that's interesting. This has nothing to do with skydiving, but it just, I mean, just made me think that, like, that's because we can't stop difficulty and struggle and problems from happening in our lives, right? Like, that's just part of being on this earth. Those things are going to happen. And so it just made me think, like, I want to be that type of person. I want to.
Yeah. Well, certainly listening to Andrea's story, I mean, her attitude clearly made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know that's kind of cliche, but it's also pretty true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've done it again.
Hour and 9 minutes.
You've burned up a perfectly good hour listening to JRuss and Chris and Andrea today. That was a fun conversation. It was good to hear from her. Encouraging.
Yeah. And I know that the injury that she's got, that she had before she came here, I think is something she's going to overcome and be back jumping next year.
Good.
It's good to see.
Very good. Cool. Yeah. Well, if you're listening and enjoying the show, we're thankful for you. We're thankful to have you in the audience. And like we said before, any questions or comments that you want to pass our way, we would love to hear those. Send us a message on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, through the Crave website. Or if you want to share a video with us, send us a video of yourself. We'll be happy to check it out and give you some feedback, tips, maybe a little bit of coaching or whatever. But that's why we're here. We want to help everybody do more and be better.
Be better.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, JRuss, man. That was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
All
Good
right,
week.
bye-bye. You
See
too.
ya.
Bye.